and welcome to another episode of the Scions of the Southland recap show. As always, my name is Akshay Schwarn, and joining me over from Chicago, Illinois, a man who is obsessed with his beloved Chicago Bears and their NFL playoff odds, Mr. Jake Grant. How are you on this beautiful night, sir?
As always, you really talk me up. I appreciate the oversell. You might paint me to be a bigger Bears fan than I am, but it's nice to see the hometown team win. I don't know. You guys probably know this, but I'm not the biggest NFL guy, so I just I
Wow, you don't say?
I gotta ride that fantasy football. But other than that, it's tech or nothing, I guess. I don't know. Fun life.
I don't know if I can condone that setup, given Tech Sports' recent history.
Can I just be a tech baseball fan or something? I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll allow it. Okay, we'll allow it. We don't have a lot of stuff to get to this week, so maybe we'll talk some baseball if we have some time. We had some women's basketball news pop up. Um, we wanted to talk about our swim and dive rankings again. I know we talked about that before the show. We had some men's basketball games this week, and then some football news as well as we wrap up the 2020 season, as it were. And I know we have a couple of beefs that we want to get off our chests coming up here as well.
If you're interested in the tea, you can probably skip to 10 minutes before the end, and you'll probably land smack dab into me saying something ridiculous about the playoff. But until then, we got plenty of basketball to talk about and keep that seat warm. So
All right, let's throw our usual 35 minutes on the clock plus our usual stoppage time. Hopefully, it will not be the abundance of stoppage time that we've had previously. For our ref tonight is feeling a little less generous, and by ref I mean my personal bedtime.
I was gonna say
Uh,
we should get a tech person in here just to call the ref, keep us in our corners, be the nice umpire. Uh,
oh, I can't wait to be shown a red card for saying something dumb. Just obviously because podcasting is a visual medium, you'll watch me get issued a red card, but uh, you know that would be an interesting experience.
Speaking of cards, a big benefit to my volleyball watching experience this year, because I like to make it over to O'Keefe, was bringing a green flashcard with me in order to be like, you should
For the
challenge.
challenge.
Uh-huh.
You should
And
have just put a challenge flag in your sock.
that would have been a little too on the nose, I guess. The volleyball, I like it. It's a little subdued. It's just the flashcard, because outside those four walls, it means nothing. It's a little square, but inside, it's kind of a giant screw you to the ref.
It's
So
a giant meme.
we who likes memes? Certainly not us.
Certainly not us. All right. 35 minutes on the clock, and here we go. First up, women's basketball games this week were postponed because of COVID issues. I don't believe they were at Tech's program. I think it was both with Miami and with UCF. Miami was supposed to be on the 17th, and UCF was supposed to be tomorrow, the 21st. So we won't see women's basketball back in action until the 31st when they play conference favorite NC State at 7 p.m. on your local RSN.
Yeah, those were within the programs. I was like, I should check ramblinrep.com. So I googled it real quick. Those were on us, and I'm sure excited to take a week plus off and then run straight into the buzzsaw that is the best team in the conference. But we did beat them once last year in the
Almost beat
regular.
them twice, right? Like we had a shot in the second game too.
Oh yeah, it was close. They pulled away in the end. That was the same. That was the same day that we took on Clemson in the men's postseason. So that must have been the first round of the ACC tournament. Yeah, I think the first round of the ACC
Yeah,
tournament.
yeah, I remember getting that really crappy draw.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but I mean, I think Tech. I mean, we at least have a shot. We boat raced Notre Dame and outshot them with a super understaffed team, and who knows, honestly, coming out of the COVID break, what Georgia Tech is going to look like, considering we haven't seen Fletcher yet, we haven't seen Anaya Boyd yet, who's our top ranked freshman. Yeah, if they keep playing like they did, Boston College and Notre Dame, Tech had a really great spread offense and was super effective, really from anywhere. Yeah, NC State just got to stay out of foul trouble, scrap for some 50-50 balls, and hopefully the threes keep falling, because I think we're at 10 per game the last two games. So
Impressive.
that's I think a problem for next week's podcast, right? I don't think. When is NC State?
NC State's the 31st. So probably next week, maybe the week after. Time is weird. Probably the week after.
So yeah, hopefully when we talk about them again in 2 weeks, we have nice things to say, and hopefully Tech can get the COVID under control, because that's not ideal. But you know, if there's a time to just watch a lot of film and hunker down, it's going into your best opponent on the schedule, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. It is important to note that this same NC State team beat number 1 ranked South Carolina earlier this year. So keep that in mind. Buzzsaw is accurate. Moving on, let's talk about updating the CAP, the Collegiate Aquatic Performance Rankings that we invented from the Rumble Seat. Totally not as a metric just to pump up Georgia Tech swim and dive, but it did it for us anyway. So let's talk about it. The men in the latest update were ranked 10th. That would place them 4th out of 11 programs in the ACC, and the women were ranked 28th, 8th out of 12 programs in the ACC. Mr. Grant, you are the swim master here. Please tell me how to interpret these.
Yeah. Again, the biggest caveat we have with CAP is we're only as good as our numbers. Unlike, a college football playoff committee that can really watch all.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Spoilers.
No. Again, with swimming, even schools like Georgia Tech are pretty aggressive getting our content on ACC Network Extra when we're at home, but you really can't watch all these. You can get the times, and that's about it. And what are the times we have access to? Well, we got the top 100 out of the USA Swimming Database. So say if you look at our rankings and you go, wow, HIT just doesn't exist in them. Yeah, they don't, because they don't have a top 100 swim in any event, but they're receiving votes in the coaches poll. So again, that's our caveat. The way we want to look at the CAP, though, is it basically is saying that Georgia Tech's men are putting pretty decent rate of top 100 swims, again, compared to the rest of the country, something that definitely overrates us relative to what coaches see. And a lot of that, I think, reflects well in the CAP rankings that we have here, because at the end of the year, a lot of what goes into building a regular season swim program is having depth, is having that B relay score points, is having the third guy picking up those 1-2 points in every event down towards the bottom. But when you get to the NCAAs, you got to go fast and you got to finish towards the top. And what does Tech have, especially on the men's side, is that top end talent, and we're seeing it more on the women's side than we have in the past. So again, I think, and it kind of feeds into the other topic we have, is talking about the schedule that they released for the spring. The men and the women both have very compelling schedules. They see Bama, a top 15 team on both sides, Auburn, a top 25 team on both sides, Florida State, we've seen them already, but a top 25 team on both sides. Gardner-Webb, senior day, it's the same reason that you make, a looser opponent your homecoming game in football. But yeah, no, I think we have a really compelling schedule. We'll really see what this team is made of down the stretch. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to go knock on some wood right now. Hopefully, y'all heard that. Next poll, if the women can knock out Florida State, who they beat once already this year, again in because we see them again on the schedule, we can see them ranked in January.
Regardless of whether it's our poll or the coaches poll, we will see them ranked in January if that's the case.
Yeah, and that much like football, much like basketball, you see a inertia of narrative, an inertia of blue-bloodedness. Be that, wow, Illinois is supposed to be really good at basketball this year. Let's keep them ranked real high as we can. And now they have 3 losses. And they're still a good team, but they kind of have that benefit of the doubt. Georgia Tech men's swimming, more than the women, have that benefit of the doubt. It's a team you see in the polls a lot. It's a team that has had pretty good depth the last 5 or 6 years. The women are going to have to prove themselves, even though we see them being at least pretty competitive on a relative stage. And of course, it still puts them at 8th in the conference. So again, you have a stacked conference. How much does that really matter? And I'll put it like this. If the women throttle Vanderbilt, which other than Gardner-Webb is the Vanderbilt only has a women's team, so that's why it doesn't apply to the men. If the women throttle Vanderbilt, who is the worst team in the SEC, but is still a top 40 team in our metric, I think that will be a good judge for their growth this year.
Because unlike football, swimming does have cross-conference play.
True. I think a great part of this pandemic, I don't know if it's Coach Hart finally, I guess, listened to our podcast, read what we write. The swim team has scheduled week 3 years ago, and it's slowly gotten better, I'd say. But this is the best schedule we've seen in years. I'm talking about this in my column tomorrow, or I guess today. So by the time you hear this, go click over on what I have to say, and we can dive into this all we want. But no, Georgia Tech. I don't know if it's the pandemic or what, but we have both SEC Alabama schools. We saw UGA at their invite. We're going to see Florida State twice, which is a great team. I'd say it's been pretty good to us.
And you also sort of take advantage of the fact that the Southeast is a hotbed for swim talent, right? Because you have all of these really good programs in this area. Even like you said, even Vanderbilt, Nashville is a top 40 program by our metric, and probably even by the coaches poll if they went down to 40. You have Athens, you have South Carolina, you have Tennessee, you have Alabama, you have Auburn, you have FSU, you have all these schools in the same area, and especially when you're limiting travel because of COVID, you're forced to focus on building your schedule out of those teams, and also because you're not pulling in mid majors, you're forced to schedule with the best of the best because those are the teams that are in your region. So this is how you get a very competitive, very compelling schedule for the back half of the slate here.
Yeah, I really like what they've done. Again, I really got hung up on us ducking UGA taking us off their schedule. Whatever, you're never really going to get a clean narrative on that. I was hung up on that for a long time of hey, we want to see teams like that. Whatever. If they don't want to be on ours, if we don't want them on ours, that's kind of what it is. But you got to fill those gaps, and to see Alabama, to see Auburn, that's what you want, right? You want to build the best.
Better than Delta State.
Better than Emory. I mean, no disrespect to them. They're D3 champs on the women's side and the men's side in the last 10 years, and I think many times in the last 20 on both sides. So great team, D3. But they are D3.
They're close by, but they're D3. So it always comes with a caveat.
Yeah. If we had COVID scheduled Emory or something like that, I'd probably be livid. But to not see SCAD, oh my gosh. How
True.
all right.
All
That's
right, let's move on. Last rankings update for us. Volleyball moved up to 7 in their coaches poll. No, we don't have our own metric that gasses them up to number 1, but maybe we will. Who knows?
yeah. Who knows? And important thing to consider there's no Big Ten teams, and I don't think any Pac-12 teams on that because I don't think either conference had a fall slate. But they're only ranking 15 teams, so who knows when that spring schedule will get dropped? Who knows what'll happen when we go to a full ranking if the Big Ten even plays? Who knows what's up with that?
Savor it for now.
Yeah, at the very least, top 10 with a bit of an asterisk. I still think this is a top 15, top 20 program in the country. And wow, I got to go knock on more wood.
No one's saying they can't hang a fall championship, ACC championship banner
I
right
still
now.
think they should. I think they should call this a dub and take the conference title because I don't know. Not that I'm doubtful about our chances in the spring. I think the tennis teams, I think golf, I think baseball, all have very legitimate shots. And I mean, if men's swimming all brought some crowbars up to Greensboro with them for the conference championship and just had a couple strategic thwacks of NC State and Virginia, maybe there too. But
No, we're not going all. God damn, I can't remember the name of the ice skater.
Tanya Harding,
Yeah, we're not going Tanya Harding on other people. We're not condoning this. Your point has been
So
made, but I'm not condoning violence.
What I'm hearing is volleyball just needs to take their ball and go home and hang a banner for the fall of 2020.
So should Cincinnati, but we'll get there.
I was gonna say, is that how many playoff salt jokes is that already? 2, 3? Somebody should
Three,
keep
at
count of
least
that.
3, but we'll get there. Speaking of salt, men's basketball has played a couple of games, one of which left us a little bit salty, at least with the ending. That was a loss to Florida State last week, but they did pick up 2 wins over. I guess you'd call them mid and low majors in Florida A&M and Delaware State. Low majors?
Low majors.
Dude, I'm not the basketball guy. All right, this is you as the Midwesterner are supposed to be telling me how basketball works here.
Is this where I go wax poetically for 15 minutes about the beauties of mid-major Midwest basketball?
No, we have 21 minutes left, so let's cut to the chase. Florida State game, I think it was basically the same mistakes that we've seen from Georgia Tech men's basketball since the dawn of time, turnovers and a lack of good shooting from the perimeter, and they just struggled with the length and the height of Florida State. With Florida A&M, and I'll let you finish, or I'll let you jump in once I finish going through all 3 games. Florida A&M, they had let A&M hang around, and they did not close that game out until the final minute or so. And then with Delaware State, that one was over by like a quarter of the way through the second half. And it ended up being a huge blowout. So tell me what you think of this 3-game slate that we had so far.
I expected to be 4-2 at this point. I expected our first 2 losses to be wins, and I expected the Kentucky game to be a loss. I don't think we could have asked for much different against FSU. Would it be nice to knock them off? Yes. But
was it possible for a significant portion of that game?
They
Yes.
did the darndest thing. They did the darndest thing is they got in a 16-point hole, then went on a 15-0 run, and the crazy
climbed back into the hole.
Yeah, no, you gotta go. Oh gosh, they might do it. We could do it, and it just was too much. You start to get in foul trouble. You start to play with more. How you say?
Risk-taking, aggressiveness.
Yeah, risk-taking, aggressiveness. And this is a team that I said this in the Slack, but watching Jordan Usher play reminds me completely of Todrick Jackson because there's like a mode that he has where it's just like, all right, I have the ball. something needs to happen. I'm going to do that thing no matter what happens. And against Florida A&M, which is not a team where you need to be vaulting a guy 8 feet from the 8 feet from the hoop, he tried to vault a guy and came down crashing into his hip because, why not take yourself out for the season against FAMU to get a ridiculous acrobatic dunk? And I appreciate it. The dude puts his heart on the line, and that is the most commendable thing you can do for the team. But, there are just some times when this team is like, all right, I have the ball. I need to shoot the three. I need to drive the basket. And, not that I'm not saying that's what happened against FSU, but it definitely changes the way they play the game.
And sort of similar to that, the Delaware State game was just a plotting mess because no one felt the need to do that. I get what your point. Your point is I think your point is that sort of risk taking works out sometimes, but other times it's just like a panic mode for the fan. And with just I don't know what it was about this Delaware State game because we were watching this before we got on. It was just very, very boring. And I kind of, in retrospect, I kind of would appreciated some sort of ridiculous risk taking. Like we saw the alley-oop dunk in midway through the second period. Like that was cool. I'm not going to argue against that. But
off the backboard thing?
Yes. Yeah, that was cool. I got to watch that live. I haven't seen that since watching NBA games. That's totally cool. It's just, other than that, this game was very not fun to watch. And I think when we were talking about it before we hit record, you're like, well, this is just like how Georgia Tech plays basketball. It's a very defensive, very not necessarily conservative, but it's not like when it works, it's not necessarily the most exciting to watch on the attacking end of the floor.
And I think that's kind of part of the reason why I've never really dove down what I'm about to say. So I'm workshopping it live.
You're workshopping a take here. You're proofing a take here.
Yeah, before it goes in writing, before it goes on Twitter,
before it goes in the oven.
Exactly. I think that part of the reason that we say or see a lot of times Georgia Tech playing up or playing down to its opponents or whatever is because we play a aggressively defensive brand of basketball. That's what our coach is known for, and he does a really good job of defensive scheming. Just putting that out there. That really responds and on the offensive end depends on, one, how well that defense is working in a given moment, and two, is completely pace driven, not by the other team, but by our defense. That if we are effective on defense in grinding them out through long, drawn out sequences, then we're going to be playing with less possessions. And Lord knows that it takes us, some rhythm, some working into it, some, for lack of a better term, figuring out their own defense. So I think it's that backside of the same coin.
Mm-hmm. Right? It's just like watching Iowa play football. It just sucks.
Yeah.
Full respect. I'm not saying I don't have anything against Iowa football, and to a certain extent, that's sometimes fun to watch. But man, is it just you feel like you're in the Stone Age watching that brand of sport at certain times.
Any other Atlanta, Georgia Tech, whatever audio media is not going to make this comparison, but I will.
Oh God.
Georgia Tech men's basketball played a lot like the late years of Coach Joseph's women's basketball team.
Okay. You need to elaborate.
Elaborating, a aggressively defensive, scrappy defensive team, which on the other end, especially before this year for the men and before last year for the women, was very dependent on the big guy in the middle doing the stuff with limited success on the three. If you remember your sophomore year, so 2016,
16,
my
16.
freshman
Yeah.
year, the only person you would trust to get anywhere near a 3-point shot was Quentin Stevens.
Yes.
Not even a Kogi or Todrick. If Todrick was shooting a three,
Todrick, no.
we saw it against the NC State game where it came down to the wire. Todrick Jackson is the one that jacked up the three and bricked it. You know, like that is the brand of not. And again, not to bring in 4-year-old beef here, but until this year, and I think it'll play out more over the ACC schedule. We are conditioned as Georgia Tech men's basketball fans to expect that. Obviously, Jose's never not going to be a scrappy player on the defensive side of the ball, and I think Pastner does a great job of bringing that out in how he trains up his guys and Coach Revenue and the rest of the staff. But on the offensive side, just getting that space, and you can see a difference. I think we saw today more of that space that we didn't see against FAMU. Another thing that we saw against Kentucky, they did a really good job of getting, looks down the baseline, looks from the three, looks on the drive. And, when you put up almost 100 points, clearly it's doing something of working. But again, the reason that even scoring as many points as we did tonight is a plodding game is because of the competition. And it's also a fact of the matter of, or a fact of modern day conferences and basketball and what have you. The same reason you don't see as many intersectional football games, the same reason you don't see as many non-conference baseball games. It's the death of the mid-major versus Power 5 matchup, or Power 6, I guess.
This is where the Midwesterner who watches Arch Madness just cries into his sleeve.
Dude, I remember 2006 really, really, really vividly. I went to at least 5 Bradley games, but there was 4 Missouri Valley teams in the NCAA tournament, including Bradley, of course. But that's what you get when you lose the I guess DePaul's in the Big East, so that's a bad comparison. The Loyola versus Wisconsin, or the Marquette versus the UIC, or Georgia State. Well, I guess Georgia State, we literally played them this year, so that's a bad comparison.
Yes, and we lost.
But you don't see as many of those games, right? And Georgia State is a different. The thing that you lose the fastest in that is the interesting intersectional Power 5, Power 6 matchups, and the interesting intersectional Power 5, any Power 5 team versus a mid-major basketball team. Like, you still see the CBS Sports Classic, or like the preseason NIT or whatever, where it's 4 teams, but it's, what is it? Kentucky, UNC, UCLA, Ohio State. Wow, how many titles do they represent? Like 30 years worth?
Oh boy, we're like, you're going into like double meaning territory with this rant now, and we're getting dangerously close to spoiling our stoppage time special here.
Yes. Anyways, we're deep in the meaning of college basketball scheduling rant, but that's why you see plotting uninteresting matchups, right? Delaware State is inherently an uninteresting team, just like FAMU is.
But that's not okay. Again, we have to hedge here and give respect to our fellow, educational institutions at Delaware State and Florida A&M, but they are not particularly compelling basketball opponents, and I say that knowing full well that Georgia Tech basketball, in recent memory, has lost to similar opponents. So
the darndest part is, even beating Delaware State is going to be a giant cudgel on our RPI, our net, or
just like Clemson was last year. Or it was Clemson on the women's basketball side. We beat Clemson twice. And
they were horrible.
Yeah, but they were terrible.
Yeah.
So,
and again, they're a Power 5 school.
But Power 5 school with an RPI that was like 200.
Yes, but and the thing that is different there is RPI is also based off the opponents of our opponents' records. So all those teams that Delaware State plays also play into our record. And spoiler alert, they're not any good either.
Womp womp.
Yeah.
All right. Just to wrap up, men's basketball is back in action in 3 days versus UAB. They will go to Birmingham for that one. That one's at 8 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. And then they will finish out the year, or this year, at least, calendar year, in McCamish versus UNC. That's on the 30th at 8 p.m. on your local RSN.
I have a legitimate comment or question.
Okay.
Does CBS Sports Network play the March Madness music? We are going to find out on Wednesday.
Okay. I don't know if they do. I haven't watched the game. I haven't watched a basketball game on CBSSN in a while.
In this house, we are ESPN ACC Network stans.
Big fans of the mouse. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the fallout from the 2020 football season. News came down, I think, the day after we recorded last week that Tech was going to opt out of a bowl invite. That plus a couple more schools opting out during the week and in the lead up to today ended up making the ACC bowl slate quite thin. Let me see if I can pull that up.
I can vamp here.
No. I have it. So we'll talk about Clemson, Notre Dame in a little bit. But UNC is in the Orange Bowl versus Texas A&M. Miami is shunted over to the Cheez-It Bowl versus Oklahoma State. NC State is in the Gator Bowl versus Kentucky. That sounds familiar. And then Wake Forest is in the Duke's Mayo Bowl versus Wisconsin. So dropping back to Clemson and Notre Dame, they played the ACC title game yesterday. That was it was a game. It was a game that I watched until halftime when it became uninteresting. Clemson 34, Notre Dame 10. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it was boring. I thought it went exactly how we thought it would. But I think the most amusing thing that could come out of this horrible set of four teams. Sorry,
we still have some other stuff, so you can tease. But
the most interesting year in college football wound up with the most predictable playoff. But anyways, I think the most compelling matchup that we could get out of this is Notre Dame versus Clemson, number 3.
It really is, and I do want to see. I kind of do want to see it, like not from like a meme standpoint, although that's definitely part of it. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say that's not part of it, but it would be interesting to see two ACC teams and how the SEC handles that level of being shunted out of their own party, or what just seemed that they think is their own party.
Yeah. I mean, I still think Cincinnati should have gotten it, but, if Notre Dame, I wasn't convinced that anybody had a shot against Bama until last night, because I don't think Florida's all that good, and they gave Bama a run for their money. So if Ian Book can let Notre Dame settled for field goals early, it's the same thing. It was like watching the beginning of the Northwestern Ohio State game all over again. Stop settling for field goals. Stop throwing stupid interceptions, whatever, giving up the ball. If Notre Dame doesn't settle for field goals, they might give Alabama a run for their money. Am I saying it's likely? Nah.
No, the line on that game opened at Bama by 17.5. Let's keep that in mind.
If they cover, I will call that a win for them. But I'm pretty sure we all know it's going to be Alabama probably versus Clemson for the 5th time in 7 years, right?
It's like the 6th or 7th time.
And in those I think it's the 4th time in the last 6 years that they've met in the championship game.
But they've met at least once in the semis.
Yes. And in each of those other 2 years, baby. The matchups were Georgia versus Alabama played Clemson in the semis the year that they played Georgia in the in the
I
final,
don't know.
right?
I
Anyways,
don't remember.
Alabama and Clemson, one of the two was in it the other 2 years, with Clemson last year and Bama in 2017. So, very very familiar sight. As for the other four bowls, I think they're actually pretty compelling matchups.
I think okay. I don't know about. Okay, I will say this. I don't know about the other like the non-Orange Bowl ones. I think Wake Forest versus Wisconsin is watchable. NC State versus Kentucky will be interesting. Miami, Oklahoma State just seems weird, like a very like weird mix of teams. But
That.
UNC Texas A&M is very interesting to me. Um, does Texas A&M have this like SEC team doesn't want to be here hangover in this game? Does UNC rise to the occasion in this game? Like, it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm a big stan of all three of these top bowls. Orange Bowl, love the Orange Bowl. Cheez-It Bowl always seems to be pretty interesting.
Never forget the first Cheez-It Bowl, the
Yeah.
Cal TCU Cheez-It Bowl that had more picks than completed passes.
The and of course Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. Who doesn't love that? Tech has historically seen success at the Jacksonville Stadium.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
2006 ACC championship notwithstanding. But the one bowl that I hate more than any other in America is the bowl formerly known as Belk. So either way, Wake Forest or Wisconsin, I just hope that Belk Bowl loses.
Well, there probably won't be fans, or there will be limited fans. So, like financially, technically,
They could have had Auburn GT, and they should still feel bad for not making that happen 2 years ago.
we're rehashing old beef again. All right, with the 2 minutes that we have before stoppage time, and the rants that we have to go, let's wrap up some more of these news items. National Signing Day was last Wednesday. Uh, we had some transfer news that broke. Tucker Gleason, quarterback, and a wide receiver, Amarine Brown, are both transferring out of the program. We wish them well wherever they're headed next. James Graham also announced that he was headed to Georgia Southern, so good luck to him. Transferring in, we have offensive lineman Devin Cochran from Vanderbilt, who is supposed to transfer in for the 2020 season. There were some extenuating circumstances there. Sort of still unclear what the situation is, but he did announce that he will be heading to Georgia Tech this spring. So that's awesome. Defensive tackle Macias Scott from South Carolina. That was part of the fallout from Will Muschamp getting fired in Columbia. Linebacker Kevin Harris from Alabama. Offensive lineman Nick Pendley from Mississippi State, and defensive back Kenyatta Watson II from Texas are all reporting to Tech for next season. Wide receiver Jalen Camp and linebacker David Curry both declared for the NFL draft. We'll see how their workouts and their draft position sort of shake out this spring. And then two players from this year's team said that they were going to return for a second senior year, as they can, because this year basically didn't count for eligibility for the NCAA. Offensive lineman Ryan Johnson, and then defensive back Tariq. We are now into stoppage time. I know you have on here that you wanted to talk a little bit about, before we get into our rant, you wanted to talk a little bit about one of the interesting announcements that came out of signing day.
Yeah. Before we do this, I do want to shout out Keon White, who's another transfer in.
Yes, I knew there was a name that I missed.
Yes. Very hot commodity from Old Dominion. Yeah, Old Dominion.
Yep.
19.5 tackles per loss and a couple sacks plus a half. So definitely good to see him joining the old squad. Seems like we've really rocked the transfer in market. Hopefully, especially on the lines, those can pick up right away. But yes, the box is the streetwear brand for real, or just for the video? That is important.
I kind of hope it's real. So
Me
if you
too.
didn't know, Tech released a video the day before signing day, so Tuesday, that seemed to advertise a streetwear brand, with a partnership with Adidas that had, the 404 logos, the ATL logos, and all that stuff, on denim jackets and like track jackets and all that stuff. Um, I don't know. I would. I mean, it said coming 2021. It was kind of unclear whether it was a recruiting ad or a streetwear brand announcement. Because especially because there wasn't a press release that accompanied it. It's not my style, but I'm down.
Yeah. I I think I'd still buy like something to support. But I just hope it's real. I think we've complained a lot about Adidas not showing Tech the kind of love they show other places, or Tech and Adidas not showing people that would pay good money for even half of what they offer the football players. And I
Or
think
Tech, Tech and its just Tech and its apparel contracts in general. We've complained about that too.
I I think this would do a lot to both rectify that with the fans and also just be interesting to the city of Atlanta. Like if
And recruits. Don't forget recruits.
of course recruits too. And again, if they do it, I hope they open it up to regular people. I know you and I may not buy the most of that, but there's plenty of people that are either closet Tech fans or relative Tech fans, but could go straight into what Matt Brown wrote 2 days ago, that we should talk about off air so we can bring it back to the podcast next week. But the way Georgia Tech is going to succeed in Atlanta is by making routes that we either used to or never did have with people. And I think something like this really speaks to the specific culture and vibe of Atlanta in a way that we could really, really benefit from.
Mm-hmm. And this is the last thing I have to say on this before we move on. It's kind of like what Oregon did with the flashy uniforms at the tail or like the mid 2000s, right? Oregon is not a national brand, or it was not a national brand. Oregon was not. I mean, it wasn't a dumpster fire, and but it like that brand and that organization was completely supercharged by Phil Knight pumping money into his alma mater and then saying, "Look, I will make you a new uniform for every single game that you play," and that's what became Oregon's thing. That's what people knew Oregon for. And so if and Oregon was kind of the first team to take advantage of that and take advantage of just like kids' propensity to be like, ooh, I want the shiny new. And if Tech can sort of capture that same magic with something like this, then you're cooking with gas there.
Yeah. Um, we don't need to be Oregon. We just need to be Georgia Tech. And I think this would be a really great way to be Georgia Tech. Um, Also, shout out to the people on Reddit who were commenting that those streets were closer to Georgia State than Tech. We are a 4-minute drive away from each other. It is all relative. No, that's the kind of thing that if you can show Atlanta and you can use Atlanta, that's what Collins is trying to do, right? I think this would be a logical extension of his mission in the city, if that's an okay way to put that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's like it's all about trying to connect to the culture of the city, connect to the 404. God, I can't believe those words came out of my mouth. Um, I think we've given the idea of the brand and the marketing a lot of grief, just because it's all sticky and it's not so it's hard to see marketing working well when you're losing games. I think
Yeah,
is sort of our thought on it, but these type of things are investments that can pay off.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I it it's something that needs to happen in some form, I think.
Okay. Speaking of which, something that needs to happen in some form. We have 6 minutes on of stoppage time left. Our ref has been very gracious and bequeathed upon us that time. The college football playoff is dumb. Please discuss.
Yeah, um, I think we see that from this that it's not a fun system. It's not a competitive system. It's just an invitational that can be manipulated in order for it to be, I guess, what the powers that be see as the most beneficial. Like the damning part of this is our athletic director is complicit in this. We don't know what he says or what he does, but like Georgia Tech has a relatively high voice, and the college football playoff committee is more representative of G5 schools and the non-Ohio states, Clemson's, Alabama's, Oklahoma's of the world, and yet we still got very much a similar uh, outcome, right?
Yeah, and this is something that you were talking about before we got on the air. Just compare the numbers, the unique teams that have made the playoff versus the unique teams that made the BCS championship game. 11 unique schools have been slotted into four playoff slots in what, 7 years, 7 iterations, compared to 15
Yep.
unique schools across what, like 14, 16 years, with 2 spots of the BCS.
Yeah.
It's
If my math is correct, we're at 20. We're at 28 playoff spots that have ever existed, and there were 32 slots that ever existed in the BCS. Next year would have to be a completely unique slate from any team we've seen before. So
which is
no
not
Oregon,
happening. It's going to be 3 of
yeah,
the same teams. Like
no
it's
Michigan,
all
no Ohio State, no Clemson, no Alabama, no Georgia, no LSU, no Oklahoma.
which
But
is just
that's
not going to
where,
happen because 3 of those teams are the best recruiting teams in the country.
yeah,
It's
um,
just not going to
and
happen. And I remember you made a point, and I want you to bring it up because you remember it specifically. But you made a point well before we were talking, just about the parody or the self fulfilling prophecy of the sport.
well, it's a self fulfilling prophecy because when you make the playoff the end all be all, and that's what it is. There's shows committed to it. There's an obsession with it. That the
There's an
playoffs
entire
are,
cottage industry that
yeah,
ESPN has created of criticism from like that's both supports the playoff and criticizes the playoff
and
I-
and there's
that they own.
well, if you look at it like this, right? The BCS, once it was unhooked from being the Rose Bowl is the national championship game, the Orange Bowl is a national championship game, became a the best bowl out of the set of the bowls, right? But still, if you were one of not one of the two teams that went, the Rose Bowl still had the cachet of the Rose Bowl. The Orange Bowl still had the cachet of the Orange Bowl, but we live, wow, college football is not life. College football is a part of life. But we exist in a time where increasingly you can't say we won 9-10 games and the Gator Bowl or the Citrus Bowl or the
Or
even like
whatever, like tier
an inaugural
one,
year.
tier one historically good bowl. Insert that here.
Yeah. And you can't look to that or point to that as a or even a conference championship. If you win a conference championship and you're not in the playoff, it's like, really? That doesn't turn heads. It goes, what's wrong with you? And
Mm-hmm.
in a way that the sport concentrates its power, or it becomes more and more stratified. The more and more uh, the playoff becomes the end all be all, which makes recruits go to certain schools, which makes certain schools win, which makes certain schools go to the playoff, and it becomes like more and more of a big mass momentum, constant motion machine, right? And
Mm-hmm.
once that wheel is spinning, it's spinning, and that's where we're at in this cycle, I think. And it's really interesting, I think, to see how the like uniqueness of the playoffs, or the unique number of teams, has changed as it's gone as well. Because I mean, obviously, yes, now in the first time they had it, that Clemson is going to be it's the first time Clemson was there, right? But still, Oregon, Michigan State, same year. It's not like it.
Washington was an isolated thing. LSU was an isolated thing.
Georgia was an isolated thing. Even
I hope it continues to be an isolated thing.
I agree, but the point is, we see this year 4 teams that have already made the playoff before. It was interesting in 2018. Notre Dame Notre Dame made it this year. Last year, LSU made it this year. We have the least interesting field as ever been. 2017, oh wow, Georgia's in the playoff this year. 2016, oh wow, Washington's in the playoff this year. 2015, 2016, you had Michigan State. Oklahoma was a first-time appearer. Clemson was a first-time appearer.
And then 2014 was the first iteration of the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Which still had Alabama and Ohio State, but at least
Florida State.
Yes. But at least every year before this one, there was at least one new thing. There was at least one. Okay, like whatever. Clemson, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State are here a lot, but I don't know. And you had a perfectly good argument to have a quality Cincinnati team in this playoff, and even Coastal Carolina, outside shot, whatever.
Yeah, look, we're running dangerously out of stoppage time, but
and dangerous out of our wheelhouse.
That too. But my thing here is the sport has never been fair, but this is just like anti-competitive at a certain level. And you're right. It is all just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is all a perpetual motion machine that prints money for ESPN and the conferences. You had a Power 5 athletic director say point blank on ESPN that a G5 team can make this playoff, when we all know that is patently false, given the criteria that they have historically set down for inclusion in the playoff.
The most damning part of that is that you can see an Iowa State team with 3 losses, including a mutual loss to a team that Coastal Carolina beat, and be above them. Like it's like, oh yeah, well then if the regular season actual results don't matter, and you said, like, I don't know.
It's something that the Athletic touched on. It's something you're touching on, something that the Athletic touched on a couple days ago when we had the last rankings release. It's like, if you're gonna rank Cincinnati below Oklahoma and Iowa State, and just like and Coastal Carolina in the same way, when we're talking about Iowa State and that mutual loss in Louisiana, why even play the games? Like, you've already come up with your narrative. Why play the games? Like, let's just set the rankings at the beginning of the season, because it obviously doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, like, even if you look at it on the face, a 1-loss Indiana team, and if Northwestern won yesterday, there was still no chance they would make it in. Even though
it might still be Ohio State. It might still have been Ohio State.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they only had 1 loss, and it was to the Big Ten champion. Well, we get it. It's the Ohio State, Oklahoma, Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame. I don't know who.
It's a cabal of 15 teams that can win the national championship in any given year, and that's the way that it's going to be. That's the way that the sport is going to be. It's a cabal of 15 teams that can compete. Let me be clear. It's a cabal of 15 teams that can compete for a national championship. It is way closer to like 5 that in any given year they can actually win it.
And Akshay, look at the G5, or not the G5, the New Year's 6. Wow, numbers. The New Year's 6 bowl selection. Yes, you have Oregon has to go tie in. That's weird. UNC has to go tie in. Whatever. Indiana's not going to a New Year's 6 bowl. Coastal Carolina is not going to a New Year's Six
Coastal
Bowl.
Carolina is ranked number 9 in the nation and got shunted over to the Cure Bowl.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was in the Peach Bowl, but you could have made a pretty compelling argument that they should have been in the playoff field.
Yeah.
Like
and Army with 9 wins isn't even going to be in a bowl at all. Like it just shows
because six SEC teams that have sub 500 records are taking bowl invites.
And we can unpack the Mike Bobo says they didn't give their players a vote thing some other time.
Okay, I don't want to. That's more worked up than I want to be tonight, and I think we need to rate it in here.
I have a closing thought at least.
Go for it.
You know, and the regular readers of our site know that me, more than anyone, I love tradition. I think that's one of the most special parts about being in college, let alone college sports, let alone college football. I think we have evolved to the point where our system is a Frankenstein monster of both what we want it to be and what it used to be. I think you can go one way. You can make it have all the bowls and then pick the 2 best teams after those bowls for a national championship. You could go to, all right, there's 10 conference championships, 10 teams make it, whatever, which essentially makes it a 20-team playoff. Whatever you want to do, there has to be a fix out there, because whatever it is, this ain't it. This is not it. Every other NCAA sport that competes in postseason tournaments, the conference champion from every conference, which is what makes March Madness compelling, which is what makes the College World Series in baseball and softball compelling, which is even what makes the most stratified sport in the world, women's college basketball, at least somewhat interesting, is that every conference champion has a seat at the table. And I'm not saying that that's possible in football just because of the ridiculous size that would make a playoff, right? And Notre Dame
we're not suggesting expand the playoff to 64 teams.
Yeah, like you can never do something like that. But even FCS manages to pull off a 24-team playoff.
It's just do pro rel. Just do pro rel in the Champions League. I'm over it. I'm just figure it out. We are promoting and relegating teams on this podcast.
I just know that I'll never look at these bowls anymore. Like, yes, as a kid, whatever, as an early college student, whatever, before the playoff really, got up and running. I'll never look at the Rose Bowl really quite the same way as, say, like my grandfather still does, right? And I think that is I'm one person in a sea of change. If you're listening to this, dear reader, and you've made it this far into our now rant completely unrelated to Georgia Tech,
we've gone off the wagon. We've fallen not only off the wagon, but off the road and maybe off the side of the mountain.
Yeah. But just something has to change. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the best solution is. But whether that looks more like what things used to be or what FCS is or some other thing, this ain't it. And you're never going to have a draft. You're never going to have recruits spreading equally all over the place. And guys who have grown up thinking that they're the cream of the crop in their high school and going off to think that they can win that spot at Alabama is going to still happen. That spot at Clemson is still going to happen. But, everyone comes from somewhere. Clemson did it, but that was also kind of in a different time. So I don't know. I just think something has to change, whether it's philosophically, systematically, because college football, this playoff is not compelling or interesting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're both still suckers and we'll watch it, despite the Rose Bowl game not being at the Rose Bowl and also not really being a Rose Bowl. But, that's the curse of the college football fan. It's just, it's broken. It needs to be fixed, but you can't stop watching what is pure drama and pure entertainment at times.
Yeah, and they'll still make their money.
They'll still print millions of dollars. Oh my God, that's the funniest part of this. No one It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that is an absolute mint.
I should be over the moon because you know what this means, right? Even though there's only 6 ACC teams in bowls, there are 2 ACC teams in the college football playoff. 1, screw you, haters. 2, that's good. That's good for the program. That's one of the big reasons that Georgia Tech went back to being in a conference after being an independent is because you pool bowl opportunities and bowl money.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, better bowls, more money, better payouts.
Benefit from this.
The sport explains everything. That's all I got. That's my last thought. The sport explains everything. It ties into everything, even the things that you wouldn't think about.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, should we call it there and let everyone off the hook and let them waddle back over to their wagons?
Yeah, I mean, we should probably put in a note that says after this point, there's no more talking about tech sports.
No. They get no warnings. I don't believe in warnings. If they want to listen, they get the whole hog.
If you are a regular listener, a regular reader, as always, you can connect with us on FromTheRumbleSeat.com at FDRS blog. You can find both Akshay and myself on Twitter. We're always down to chat. It's winter break, at least for me, so we have plenty of time to do it. And yeah, I don't know. Tell your friends. We really like doing this, and we hope that you do too.
Yeah. So listeners, thank you again for tuning in this week, and we will catch you all a little later. Have fun, stay safe, and happy holidays.